He hasn't improved from the player he was at Liverpool. I mean, that's just a straight up lie. And what were you doing at 17, like Greenwood? Probably not banging in goals for Man United. Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of TFW, where you guys can have your say and your opinion and, well, basically go ahead and discuss it. I've got my laptop right here, so let's get things started. And first off, this week I've been asking about your best and worst player of the season and the most overrated and underrated players. Because this is the internet, there's a lot of people with a lot of wild opinions, but let's get straight into it. Right, Finu Fies, first off, has said, not overrated, but an overpriced player in Lautaro Martinez. I'm going to have to agree with that. I think that there is so much about his play which is so good, and at 22, there's obviously loads of potential, but at the moment, 111 million apparently is his release clause, or is the price that Inter Milan are saying if Barcelona want to sign him. I mean, when you look at his goals, he had 27 in 60, which is good for a youngster before he left for Inter Milan. And then 25 in 66 games in all competitions for Inter. That's almost 1 in 3. He's got 11 goals a season in Serie A. I mean, that's hardly setting the world alight. He's got the same amount of goals in league games as Luis Suarez does, and he's been injured for half the season. I mean, you know what I mean? If you were signing a massive striker for 100 million, 111 million or whatever, you'd want a few more goals than that. Surely just 11 this season, 6 last season in the league, in Serie A. That's not really too much. You can definitely get players with a better record for that. Obviously, if he does move to Barca, I've no doubt he'll become a better player and probably will score a lot. But I kind of agree with you there that he is a bit overpriced. Aksai Patel has come in with some absolute big opinions. Most overrated player is Raheem Sterling, and these are the reasons that he's given for Sterling. Hasn't scored this calendar year. Scored nearly half his Premier League goals in the opening 2 games. This is oddly specific. Besides positioning, he hasn't improved from the player he was at Liverpool. I mean, that's just a straight up lie. He still lacks composure when he doesn't get into a position where he can score a tap-in. Right, okay. Not a superb dribbler. Maybe not the most tricky, certainly not a Neymar style of player, but he's quick enough to just knock it and run. Not the best passer, I'd agree with that, although I'm not sure how many wingers are great passers. Is apparently the second most valuable player in the world next to Neymar, just behind Mbappe. There's so much to break down here, but Raheem Sterling isn't in the position that he's in because he's a bad player. Saying he's overrated and then picking up a few stats is like, yes, he hasn't scored a calendar goal this year, but last year he was incredible. For the last few years, he's got 60-odd goals for Manchester City in all competitions. He is so much more of a better player than when he left Liverpool. And don't get me wrong, his few years at Liverpool, he was obviously a youngster. He was their age like 16 to 19 in the first team, I think. So you wouldn't expect too much from him. And the fact that he hit double figures in his last 2 seasons at Liverpool, he was a great talent. He was definitely worth the 50 million when they bought him. But Guardiola has brought him onto a whole new level. I mean, no offence, but Aksai Patel was sitting there at his computer thinking that Raheem Sterling's overrated for a load of random reasons and he's not the second most valuable player in the world. Yet, this Football Observatory, whoever come up with the stats, have got in-depth detailed stats about him and think he is the second most valuable player in the world. So I tend to side with them. Of course, you're allowed your opinion. I'm not sure there's many facts behind it. It's kind of, can you have a stat of lacking composure when you're not there for a tap-in? Stats aren't everything, I agree, but yeah, saying he's the most overrated player is a bit ridiculous. And also, he's 25 years old, which means he's got technically his best in his prime years ahead of him, which is why he's worth so much. This is something people fail to take into account. I've seen this loads online. If, like, your favourite player, I don't know, whether it's Van Dijk or Griezmann or someone like that isn't worth so much, it's because they don't have a bigger selling price because they're not old, they're just a little bit older. So if you're wondering, why Sterling's worth more than Messi, because he's got way more years ahead of him to be more valuable to someone. It's not how good a player they are. However, Aksai Patel, I will agree with you on the most underrated player. He said Ricardo Pereira. He's not as good as Trent Alexander-Arnold in attack. He's not as good as Wan-Bissaka in defence, but he's close to both and the most complete right back, and in his opinion, the best right back in the world. Surprised not many clubs are in for him. I think a lot of clubs already have pretty solid right backs that they aren't willing to get rid of just yet. I mean, if you look within the Premier League, there's obviously Trent, then City have got Walker, and then Bayern Munich have got Joshua Kimmich. I mean, he'd probably get into the likes of, Barcelona have still got a few players in that position. Not that they wouldn't go and sign him. Little bit the fact he's not playing for one of the biggest clubs, that obviously affects him. I think it's stupid, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, I do agree with you. Pereira is brilliant. Will McLaren next up saying the most overrated are Greenwood and Martinelli. I get the hype about young players, but people are comparing these lots to the next Messi and Ronaldo. It's ridiculous. I don't know about you, Will McLaren, but I have never heard anyone compare Martinelli and Greenwood to Messi and Ronaldo. And if you are, good Lord, man. First, give them a chance to even play some professional football, because they're youngsters. And secondly, no one's going to be the next Messi and Ronaldo. So, yeah, I think overrated is very harsh. Greenwood's what, like 18? Martinelli's like 19, maybe 20? Both of them are putting up brilliant numbers for not only for their age, but also for the amount of football that they're getting as well. Like, neither of them are guaranteed starters in either of their club. Martinelli less than Greenwood. Greenwood at least gets some Premier League starts. Martinelli gets the odd few here and there. I think both of them are doing great. To call them overrated now, whoa, there should be like a limit that you can rate players like overrated or underrated. Like over 25. Like, bloody hell, give them a chance. Will McLaren, what were you doing at 17, like Greenwood? Probably not banging in goals for Man United. Right, everything mixed next up. Griezmann has scored fairly decent amount of goals this season, and this season hasn't been the best, but he's clearly underrated. I disagree. We've had this with Antoine Griezmann before, at 29 years old, moving from second or third place in La Liga to first place in La Liga with a better team in the same league, in the same conditions, with better players around you. He cost 120 million, I think. And 14 goals in all competitions. 6 assists, I think. It's just not good enough. There's no, oh, he'll be better in the future. What future? He's 29. Like, you need it now. Barcelona spent all that money for his prime now. It's completely different to the likes of João Felix. And I bring this up because Melek Ivanov has said expectations were high for Felix, but he kind of flopped. That's completely on the flip side of what Griezmann is. Felix is 20 years old. A lot of pressure moving from one league to another, moving to a team that expects to be challenging for La Liga. I'd say that tentatively. With some of the players they've got, they should be challenging for La Liga. It's obviously more difficult without Griezmann in the form that he was in for Atleti. Definitely doing amazing things in the Champions League and asked to be their star man and signed for an enormous amount of money, right? That money isn't good for Griezmann because he's 29 and he knows the league and he should hit the ground running. But if João Felix had put up those number of figures, 14 goals and 6 assists, he doesn't quite have so many. He'd be brilliant. That'd be a really good season for him. The point being that Atleti have got another 10 years to see the best of João Felix. Where, yeah, Barca, realistically, if Griezmann doesn't have a good season next season, they'll probably ship him out age 30. They definitely won't get 120 million for him. Like, Atleti can sell João Felix on the promise that he's got good potential for the next few years and probably make a decent amount of money. Next up, Anish Rockport said, overrated, you say? Who else can it be other than my boy Jack Grealish? That lad has zero special qualities. Couldn't disagree more with that. He is 1 goal behind the highest goal-scoring midfielders in the Premier League this season. He's got 7. Ali and Kevin De Bruyne have 8. He's got joint 3rd in the assists in the Premier League. So, I mean, Kevin De Bruyne is way up there with 16. And then Trent Alexander-Arnold in 12. And then him and the likes of Mahrez in 7 or 8 or 6, I think. And yeah, all of this whilst being captain of a team that's bound for relegation. I mean, you can't really say someone's overrated if you can say they're overrated if, like with the Griezmann thing, if they're top of the league and loads of expected of them and they're in an unbelievable team and they were bought for loads of money. Jack Grealish is playing in a really, really poor Aston Villa side who, if the season continues, are probably going to get relegated. But he's still putting up those good numbers, still being talked about. Right, if he was that bad, not many people would talk about him, and still being linked with big moves. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, I think that rumours aren't necessarily always a lot of truth. There's never much truth behind rumours, and yes, Jack Grealish may not be worth 40 to 50 million, but certainly think about how bad Aston Villa would be if they didn't have him in the squad. I really disagree. I mean, 0 special qualities. And he's led them to the League Cup final as well this season. Oof, I think that's a really big call. I'm not saying he's as good as everyone's saying he is, but I think he's definitely a quality player. The planner next up said underrated Raphael Varane and Thibaut Courtois. They've made sure Real have the best defence in all top 5 leagues this season, conceding 19 goals, and they have the most clean sheets in La Liga. Varane's only 26, he's been doing it for 7 years. Completely agree. Real Madrid gets such a bad rap, and don't get me wrong, I sometimes insult Real as well. They get such a bad rap for Gareth Bale being a bit of a joke, Hazard being a bit of a flop this season, which he has. You know, there's James Rodriguez, they sold Ronaldo, didn't replace him, all this attacking, yada, yada, yada. But in defence, Sergio Ramos is unbelievable, everyone knows that. Varane's been doing it for 7 seasons and has 4 Champions Leagues to his name. And Thibaut Courtois, after such a shocking debut campaign for Real, has really come good this season. So yeah, massively agree with you there. And last but not least, this is one I definitely agree with. Underrated goalkeeper Martin Dubravka, Newcastle United. Will Hales has said he hasn't missed a single league match since his debut against United. One of the main reasons Newcastle aren't stuck in the Championship and has won many games single-handedly. A brilliant buy from Benitez. Same thing with Jack Grealish. Yeah, if Newcastle didn't have Dubravka, they'd be in a hell of a worse position. 9 clean sheets this season from Dubravka. For a Newcastle side that's sat in 14th. Shows you their problems are at the other end of the pitch. 11 clean sheets last season, more saves this season than any other goalkeeper. Any other goalkeeper, he has the most saves. In fact, last year there was a Premier League rating from Marca, the Spanish newspaper, who put him as the 20th best player in the Premier League and the highest rated goalkeeper. Now, this is another one of these things. We talk about like Jack Grealish and Ricardo Pereira, who mentioned earlier, in clubs that aren't necessarily the biggest. Anyone who's, you know, saying, oh, Edison's this, Alisson's that, blah, blah, blah. Have you watched Martin Dubravka? Have you spent time watching Newcastle in 14th? I'll openly admit, I watch a lot of Premier League, haven't watched Newcastle as much as I've watched some of the biggest names. They're on TV the most, they're in the biggest competitions. I'd fully admit to that. But yeah, the bits I have seen and the stats that I've just mentioned, Dubravka's an unbelievable goalkeeper. Really, really good. I mean, he's age 31 at the moment, which means I'm not sure too many clubs will be looking to spend big money on him because he's worth big money to Newcastle. At the age of 31, as mentioned before, they want someone younger who's got more potential to develop and then maybe have a good selling price too. But yeah, massively underrated. I mean, don't get me wrong, Alisson, De Gea and Edison are in the position they're in because they are quality goalkeepers as well. But if you haven't watched Dubravka at Newcastle, you probably don't have the right to say he's terrible because he's a really good keeper. Anyway, that is all from this week's TFW. Thank you so much for all of your opinions every Sunday night in the YouTube community tabs where you can leave them and we'll discuss them on Monday's show. So whilst you're at it, let me know all your thoughts down below in the comment section. Smash the like button and click here or here to check out all of the other videos we've got going on Onefootball. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.